Good afternoon. My name is Imani Johnson. I am a senior at Anacostia High School in the District of Columbia. Also, I am the captain of the cheer team. I participate with a program called Urban Lunch, which provided me with a mentor from Street Law. At Street Law, I interned for Mrs. Johnson, assisting her with programs she oversees. I chose to work at Street Law because in the future, I plan to be a lawyer and then a judge. What role did law play in the civil rights movement?
Well, in the civil rights movement, we were protesting the laws that prohibit Negroes or coloreds at that point from housing operations, from where they lived, private jobs they got, indeed going into public restaurants. So you had basically a system where they were supposed to be servants behind the scenes and did not have opportunity. Matter of fact, when I started school in 1941, Spotsylvania County didn't even provide buses to pick up Negro kids. My uncle had to buy buses to take us to a separate school. And we did not have access to equal books. We took a lab course, we didn't have science equipment. So that was really a situation worse than what you read about in South Africa in apartheid. And it was almost like a separate caste system where Negroes were relegated to being servants, almost like slavery. Like I said, I grew up under segregation, and the point is that if you walk in the city and you had to walk off the curb, walk out in the street, if some white people came walking along and you bumped into someone that was disorderly conduct, the police officers were looking for any excuse to, in fact, arrest and charge a Negro with an offense of one type or another. And they figured that that word was gospel, and what a Negro had to say. Emmett Till got killed for whistling at a white woman. So we lived under those circumstances where, as I say, people had to come to the back door to even buy food and take it under the sand because they couldn't even eat in a public restaurant. There were colored water fountains. They didn't even use the same bathrooms. Young Negroes or colored people, white kids in this country don't realize what this country was like in the 1940s and 1950s, when we had separation as worse as in any third world country in this world. And we espoused the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, equality. But when the Constitution was written, Negroes were only considered 3/5, and those were Negro men. And the whole issue of voting rights and representation has been a virus in the democracy of this country since that time. That's why we have so much police brutality today. We have the anti-authoritarian attitudes on the part of white police officers. We have blacks who rebel against being ordered around, being told what to do. And this is why you see so many excessive use of force cases and abuse and black men being killed today, almost once every month or every other week in this country. It's part of a subcurrent of our entire culture that we have to change.
What laws were broken and how did they affect the movement?
Well, classic example, black college students got brave like I did, and they sit in counters at drugstores like the Wilmington 10. And then, as a result of their protest and demonstration, they were arrested in jail. But more important, they were charged with murder because out of the riots, and a fire occurred, and someone was killed in the fire. A gentleman named Benjamin Chambers spent 20-some years in prison for being responsible, for being one of the leaders of that group. 4 years ago, he was pardoned by the governor of North Carolina and has become one of our eminent leaders today. But he had nothing to do with the fire. And there were cases in the courts where black men were accused of rape, and the trial took 15 minutes. And the white people said he did it, and he could be presented a defense, and a white lawyer was appointed and just stood there and said, I object, I don't object. You'd be surprised how many people in this country were Nelson Mandelas and spent years of their lives in prison protested segregation in this country. Those were the laws that were broken. Even Martin Luther King and his protests and demonstrations was jailed, like his famous letter from the jail. Protested segregation in this country. You had to stay in your place. If you didn't stay in your place, they'll find some excuse, like in Ferguson. They charge people with violations to collect monies to get the revenues to even run the city. A black man's word or a black woman's word means nothing. That was the country we lived in. And after the Reconstruction, after the Civil War, those dreams did not come true.
What laws were people fighting for and why?
Right? Well, number one, fighting for the right to vote. They had poll tax. When I first voted, I had to, quote, interpret the Constitution. Fortunately, they found I was smart enough to do it, and I didn't get bumped around because of being an outstanding student. But many blacks, many Negroes, were disallowed to vote on fake excuses. There was a question of opportunity for colleges. To go to college, you get scholarships. When I applied for college, I applied to my state senator, Burnett in 1952. He would only give me a scholarship to go to a black college, not to a white college before Brown versus Board of Education. He later was embarrassed to the point where he continued my scholarship through law school too. But the point is, we had rampant separation, lack of opportunity for education, lack of opportunity for job employment. It's been tragic in this country. How much human talent has been wasted by prejudice, and the black contributions have been swept under the rug. People who have come up with blood plasma, come up with heart surgery, were Negroes, but white people took credit for it. The tragedy of this country is how much our race prejudice and separatism has deprived this country of its capital development. This country would be bankrupt if we had spent our money the way we spend our human resources. Indeed, we are decaying and becoming a second-class nation now. We are slipping in education, in the quality of education compared to Korea and other countries because of bigotry, because of fragmentation of our education system through school districts and schools throughout this nation. My organization, the National African American Drug Policy Coalition, is looking at the issue of whether we ought to seek a constitutional amendment to make education a national responsibility so that the same level of education would apply in the ghetto, in the hood, in the inner cities, as applies in the gated communities. That we don't spend $2,000 educating a kid that lives in Anacostia or in the poor areas of Washington, D.C., and $9,000 who live in Chevy Chase, or in the more affluent areas where people make incomes of $100,000 or more a year. Our educational system is totally undermining the potential quality and innate abilities of the citizens of this country.
How was law used to control people in situations?
Very easy. Dogs were sicked on people in demonstrations. John Lewis almost lost his life. Was blooded and beaten like you see some people now. They were thrown in jail. They were deprived of their liberty. And many blacks in the civil rights movement, the freedom riders movement, they were killed. They were subject to being killed like I was in order to bring about equality in this nation and open the doors of opportunity. My mother only had an 8th grade education. In rural Spotsylvania, Virginia, at the time she finished 8th grade, there was no school, high school, for Negro kids. My father only had a 6th grade education. They had 3 children, we ended up getting 6 degrees. And we changed America. That's the difference. And like I said, the world has changed, but we still have more diversity, but we have also certain cultural attitudes of all groups to each other where we need to learn and appreciate people of all segments of our society. We don't want to end up with a Protestant versus Catholic war between the Christian community and the Muslim community in this country. We don't want to repeat what happened in England and in Ireland. So we need to deal with the issue of Islamophobia and the whole issue of suspecting anyone in the garb of a Buddhist or Sikh or Islamic or Muslim faith as being a terrorist. We have to start judging people as individuals, regardless of what religious sect or group they may belong to.
What was your experience with the law at the time, and what did you see, hear, or do?
Well, I told you already about the one instance where I could have been killed. I could have been Michael Brown. In another instance here in Washington, D.C., in 1954, as a pledgee to a Greek letter fraternity at 1 o'clock at night, in a scavenger hunt, looking for broken soda bottles and bricks and stuff of this type, a group of us, 4 or 5 of us who were pledgees, were factually arrested and taken to the police station for investigation. You didn't have to have a crime just because you were black and out at night in the wrong neighborhood. And indeed, the fellow who lived here had borrowed a car from his father's service station and didn't have the registration. So the excuse was they were taking us in to investigate for a stolen car. Come to find out, they verified it, and then after 4 hours of holding us, they sent us home and said to us young boys, you better keep your, and then they used the profane word, on Howard's campus. Georgia went around the community, you might get yourself killed or shot. I spent 1 o'clock a.m. to about 5 o'clock in police custody. That was my second encounter on the opposite side of being a judge or a prosecutor, where just because you were black and in the wrong neighborhood, and indeed even today, if you see a black kid at 11 o'clock at night walking in a white neighborhood, the police car kind of eases and follows along with it for a couple of blocks. White kid, they wouldn't do that. I've had cases as a judge where if you had a black kid home from college driving his father's Escalade or driving his father's Lincoln, the police used an excuse to stop him for, quote, running a stoplight when the light was yellow and it was maybe marginal, on the basis he was a drug dealer. And I've had many cases of kids who were pre-med going to school for being doctors and lawyers from affluent black families here in D.C., stopped by the police where if they were white, it wouldn't have occurred. That occurs today. And the pretext, even the Supreme Court say you don't look at the subjective judgment of the police officer. You look at the objective fact, and if he did in fact run the stop sign, the officer had authority, and what happened afterwards is immaterial. Some of those cases end up with the kid, third-year college student, being charged with assault of a police officer. The interesting thing I learned, and this should make history for you, I was a prosecutor presenting a case against a gentleman named Marion Berry in 1966. Dave Bress was the U.S. attorney. If I had presented only one witness, the officer who claimed he was assaulted, Mayor Barrett may never have become mayor. He may have been sitting in prison for 10 or 15 years. But I went to Barry, I went to Bress, and I told him that there was such a rumbling activity that I think we had to hear from several officers. I presented about 3 or 4 officers, and when I finished, the grand jury was ready to indict a couple of officers for perjury, and Barry survived, and the case was dropped, and he became mayor of the District of Columbia. So again, you need prosecutors who don't try to stack the deck. Just don't see how many notches they can get in the guns by way of returning indictments and convictions, but trying to get the truth.